Together, Cavendish and Priestley laid the foundations of chemistry. Theirs was a pure science, the impact less obvious than the work of Bois or Jenner, and far less exciting to the public than the return of Captain Cook and Joseph Banks from their long voyage to the southern seas, bearing exotic specimens from an unknown world.
In July 1771, Captain Cook and Joseph Banks arrived back in London after spending 3 years at sea and travelling over 25,000 miles round the world. Several times their ship had been given up as lost, and almost half the crew had died of malaria and dysentery on the way home. Cook and Banks were national heroes. For surviving, yes, but also for the wonders and the stories that they brought back with them. They'd mapped New Zealand, and they'd claimed Eastern Australia for the Crown. They called it New South Wales. Banks was painted by Joshua Reynolds as a romantic hero. Young, handsome, charming, and full of travellers' tales, he was the man of the moment. Stories of erotic adventures in Tahiti only increased the admiration and wonder he inspired in London society. Banks and his friends had brought back with them a vast haul of mammals and birds, and reptiles, insects, sea creatures, ethological specimens, the like of which had never been seen in Britain or Europe before. Many of those actual specimens have now disappeared, but there are lots of drawings and paintings to show us some of the wonders that Banks and his friends encountered. Along with all the plants and flowers, birds and fish, Banks brought back the skin of a strange creature they had shot and eaten one morning in Australia. He commissioned George Stubbs, the artist, to stuff the skin and paint it. Stubbs had to make up a few details, but the result was splendid. The kangaroo caught the public imagination, and soon Banks would thrill London with another exotic creature. Banks had wanted to bring back a Tahitian with him, thinking, in his own words, to keep him as a curiosity, as my neighbours do lions and tigers. And when Cook came back from his second voyage, he did indeed bring a Tahitian, a young man called Omai. Banks fitted out Omai and took him to meet the king. Omai greeted George III with the words, "How do, King Tosh?" and the king was delighted. George III was fascinated by Banks and his discoveries, and the two men became close friends, or at any rate as close as you can be to a king. In consequence, the king put Banks in charge of one of his favourite projects, the botanical gardens at Kew. The boy, who had been inspired to become a naturalist by the wild flowers on the banks of the Thames, at only 30 years old, was put in charge of a vast garden by the river to be filled with flowers and plants from all over the world. Banks was to be the unofficial director of Kew for the rest of his long life, nearly 50 years. Under his influence, Kew became a clearinghouse for plants like tea and rubber. New species were introduced around the empire, tea and hemp to India, breadfruit to the West Indies. These botanical invasions changed landscapes and lives, fueling the expanding empire and making Britain rich. More than this, Banks was also president of the Royal Society. Under him, the society grew from a small association of natural philosophers to an increasingly influential group of practicing scientists. But for all his grandeur, Banks himself never lost his fascination with the exotic and the wonderful, regardless of any apparent utility. Here is a superb example. It's the oldest pot plant in the world, Encephalatos altensteini. It's only once borne a cone in 1819, and Joseph Banks came here to Kew specially to see it. It proved to be his last visit. He was crippled with gout, and he died a few months later. Joseph Banks put botany and zoology firmly on the scientific map. He revealed how rich and biologically diverse our planet is. He excited the imagination of the king and of the public. He made science in Britain really matter.
By Banks's death in 1820, science in Britain had come of age. The generation before them, Newton, Hooke and Halley, had turned their attention to the great puzzles of the universe. Banks and his contemporaries had taken science out into the world. James Watt's engines were transforming the landscape. The first great battle of the long war against disease had been won, and Banks's work at Kew was helping make Britain and her empire rich. This engraving was commissioned for sale to the public in 1861, and it shows how much scientists themselves had changed. This was not just a few independent thinkers, but a whole roomful of men, publicly celebrated for fueling the powerhouse that was Victorian Britain. Like the generation before them, it was curiosity which drove them. Between them they had shown that science could explore the world and transform the way we understand the very air we breathe and the water we drink.
The world is full of wonders, but they've become more wonderful, not less wonderful, when science looks at them. You may pick up a rock and find what is clearly a seashell in it. And you may say, that is wonderful. Indeed it is. But it becomes more wonderful when you know that it is 150 million years old and was laid down at the bottom of the sea. And science is full of those revelations. How wonderful it is that water can rise from the ground here and come out to the top of these trees behind me. Science explains that. It's more wonderful, not less.
Next time, big ideas about energy, engineering, and evolution. The Victorians revolutionised communication. Turn on the lights and start building the world we live in today.